Hey y'all, it's Possum Breath, but you can call me PB for short. This is another little update video. Think of it sort of like a video game patch notes, but for my clan story. It's also going to affect all of the clans, so I figured giving it its own video made the most sense. Because of the nature of this challenge, you all get to watch my creative process more or less in real time, and I think it's important to show that a story will grow and change as you work on it. I feel as though there's pressure to present a perfect finished product from the beginning, and I want to make it clear that isn't necessary, and in fact that making yourself stick to your first idea every time can be actively detrimental to your creative work. I think it's much more important to give yourself the freedom to make changes where you think they're appropriate, even if that means having to make some older content not 100% accurate. So here it is. Going forward, I will not be using the term medicine cat for my fan clans. I have a few reasons for doing this. Firstly, it's uncomfortably close to the terms medicine man or medicine woman, which reference respected figures in many real-life indigenous cultures, and are therefore not something I want to invoke. I'm whiter than white bread, that's simply not my place. Warriors as a canon has some serious problems with how it depicts indigenous cultures that other people have addressed much more eloquently than I ever could, and I'd like to not potentially contribute to those problems when I have the option to do something different. To be clear, I don't think the use of the term is always overtly disrespectful, but it makes me personally feel icky given the wider context, so I am personally choosing to no longer use it for my own projects. This is not an indictment of anyone else, or a decree from me about what is and is not an appropriate term for fictional cat doctors, so please don't take it that way. On a more practical level, I don't think these cats are handled in canon as well as they could be. They're supposed to be both physical healers and spiritual guides, but the spiritual guide part often falls to the wayside because they have so much physical healing to do. You only very rarely see a med cat offering emotional support, never mind something that could be called proper therapy, and it feels as though visions and omens and conversations with Sageclan are often an interruption to their busy schedule rather than a normal part of it. The two halves of the job also require vastly different skill sets, both of which a cat can definitely possess, but which not many cats are likely to. Your priest or rabbi or other religious leader is not often also your primary care doctor, even if both serve an important purpose in your life. And speaking as a Jewish person, part of me wishes that the medicine cats and warriors had more time to provide proper religious guidance to their clanmates, rather than it seeming like an extra burden they have to bother with. So, here's how my clans do it differently. The clans that I've created did not originally live in these territories. Their ancestors were from a different area of California, one that experienced a terrible drought. With the water drying up, the prey got scarce and the plants began to wither. Eventually they were forced to leave to seek more hospitable lands elsewhere. Many cats were weak or sick, and every cat was desperately in need of comfort and reassurance, and the medicine cats were spread far too thin trying to take care of everyone. They had to deal with heat exhaustion, dehydration and starvation, shock, grief, and crises of faith, all while also not being in great shape themselves and having very little in the way of supplies. To try and mitigate the burnout, they brought in other cats to be temporary helpers, and started assigning duties based on what each cat was most comfortable doing. And this went so well that they just never stopped. Eventually they settled in the area in which they live today, with the survivors of the journey forming the current 4 clans. The temporary helpers became permanent assistants, distinct from apprentices, and then slowly morphed into a more official 2-role system. The basic breakdown is this. Each clan has a doctor, which is a cat that primarily handles the physical health of the clan, and a guide who primarily handles their mental and spiritual health. The 2 cats share the healing den and work together, usually having some basic overlap in skills, but they are intended to work as a team. Instead of putting everything on one cat's shoulders, the duty of taking care of the clan is shared, ideally resulting in better quality of life for everybody, including the doctor and guide. This also means that cats who are excellent with herbs but may not be able to speak with Sageclan will still be able to use their talent to support the clan, and so will cats who are highly spiritual and emotionally intelligent but can't tell a daisy from a dandelion. Those who have both sets of skills simply choose the path that appeals to them more, with the understanding that they can fill in if their partner should need the extra pause. Because both roles evolved from the original medicine cat role, neither of them are allowed to have mates or kits. They are both meant to focus solely on the good of the clan overall. After all, this is still just essentially the same job, but 2 cats are doing it, so the original logic for the rule, however flawed it may be, still applies. I also like the idea that the code these clans have has both evolved past what it is in canon due to time, physical distance, and unique historical context, but still contains some outdated ideas from the canon one. Getting every cat to agree on a change to the code is very difficult. That's why a major conflict of Bushclan's story involves trying to do just that. Speaking of Bushclan's story, this also serves a purpose for that story specifically. Consider that Bushclan only has Cindertail. Cindertail was trained as a guide. His specialty is spiritual guidance and emotional healing. Bushclan lost their doctor during the sickness that wiped out much of their clan, and suddenly Cindertail was thrust into having to perform both roles, one of which he only knew how to do on a very rudimentary level. This gives him all the more reason to be in the state of anxiety and grief he's in. His clan is suffering, and he for even more reasons is not fully able to help them. He knows only basic medicine, and he's not emotionally in a good state for providing comfort and advice either. He feels like a failure, and he would even without the Smokeheart situation complicating things. It gives his struggle some extra weight, and weight that is more unique than the classic warrior cat's forbidden love subplot. This means that I need to create a few extra cats to fill in this new role. I decided to go back to the same generator I used to get the clans originally and do a few more spins of it, just enough to give me a few cats from the medcat slot that I could add into the existing clans. For Sageclan, I have a pretty clear idea of who Olive Nose and her apprentice are, and you'll meet him in Sageclan Part 2. And they are both more on the doctor side than the guide side. That meant Sageclan needed a dedicated guide. Do you remember the cat I mentioned in the first Sageclan video, Olive Nose's Aunt Moongaze? I decided that instead of her retiring and Olive Nose taking over for her, she was never a doctor, and instead is still active in the healing den as the clan's guide. This gives me a great opportunity to also talk about one of the unique parts of Sageclan's culture, how they feel about blindness. In Sageclan, blindness is considered to be a mark from StarClan that indicates that a cat has a special gift or destiny. In Moongaze's case, she was born blind, and this more or less instantly slotted her into the guide role. Not because she wouldn't have been able to do anything any other warrior could, but because the clan saw her blindness as a sign that StarClan had chosen her specifically to be their messenger. If a cat is blinded later in life, this is taken to mean that StarClan has decided something greater for them. Moongaze herself is contemplative, thoughtful, and always thinking about the future. She likes to plan things out as many steps ahead as possible, and hates ambiguity or uncertainty. She will tell you what you need to hear rather than what you want to hear. She cares about doing her job and doing it well, and she doesn't like beating around the bush to spare someone's feelings. In her opinion, that hinders more than helps. This has given her a reputation as a guide who is wise but deals in hard truths. In her case, when it comes to Sageclan's theme around masks and performance, it's less about a performance she puts on and more about expectations from other cats. They view her as a wise and all-knowing source of advice with a mystical ability to know the right thing to say or do. But from her point of view, she's just talking common sense. Because she's part of a set of 3 cats, I'm going to save talking more about the inspiration for her design until the actual Sageclan Part 2 video. For Bayclan, I went back and forth. I like the idea of Nightpelt seeing, or believing he can see, spirits out of his blind eye, so I decided he would be Bayclan's guide. But Mustard Paw is so clearly meant to be a doctor. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized 2 things. Firstly, cats other than the guide can be deeply spiritual. It would almost be odd if they weren't, with how important faith is to the clans in general. The guide is just the one whose job it is specifically to take point on spiritual matters. Secondly, I liked the idea of mad scientist Dr. Cats too much to give it up. So I went to the generator and rolled up a guide for Bayclan. Hareheart is a small cat with a big heart, hence their name. They're another cat that isn't clan-born. In fact, they used to be a kitty pet. Their name back then was Harry, and they had a cushy but boring life as an indoor-only cat, who got perhaps less attention from their housefolk than a cat needs. Like many indoor cats, they were fascinated by the door and what secrets might be beyond it, and so at about 8 months old they managed to slip outside and promptly get hopelessly lost. This area is fairly rural, so it wasn't as though they were surrounded by people who could scoop them up and take them back home. And instead they wound up wandering, mainly keeping to the roads in the hopes that one would eventually lead them back to their housefolk. Instead, they were hit by a car not far from Bayclan's territory. The barn cats found them first, and brought them to Bayclan, who, thanks to their car dodging sport, are very adept at dealing with injuries sustained on the Thunderpath. During their healing process, as they teetered between life and death, they saw and heard things they would later come to understand were visits from Starclan cats. By the time they were well again, they were convinced they had been brought to Bayclan for a reason. After growing up so lonely, they loved the idea of being surrounded by generations of loving clanmates, both living and dead, and they set their heart on becoming a guide. They're endlessly optimistic and loving, and when a Bayclan cat passes, they're the one who leads the celebration of their life. In a funny twist of fate, they're also the second fastest cat in the clan, and only Swanstone has them beat when it comes to monster dodging. I admit I took the obvious route with their design. Fluffy tail, big ears, buck teeth. I know cats technically can't have buck teeth, but these are cartoon cats, and it's cute, so I refuse to listen to logic. We'll pretend getting hit by the car knocked their jaw a little off kilter and gave them an overbite. It's fine. I think, in some cases, the obvious design is not always something you should avoid. In this case, it fits their energetic, loving, and soft personality very well, and makes them look super approachable and warm. Finally, even though she's passed on, I want to touch on Bushclan's doctor. I was phenomenally lucky, and rolled another hairless cat, so I decided that this cat would be Pebblestar's sister. I already mentioned that Pebblestar lost a mate to the sickness, and don't worry, I have plans to do a video specifically on Starclan cats from the various clans, so you'll get to learn a little more about that mate in the future. But for Pebblestar, I thought having her also lose a sister would add to her feeling of isolation. She's trying to take care of her clan and keep a brave face on for them, while also privately struggling with her own grief and loss. Brindlewhisker was excellent at her job. Like her sister, she was good at pushing through tough situations without sugarcoating the seriousness of what was going on. When the sickness hit, she did her best to combat it. She quarantined sick cats, enforced strict rules about contact, and genuinely handled it as well as she possibly could have. It was when she fell sick too that things took a turn for the worse. But she worked up until she physically couldn't stand anymore, and then after that she gave Cindertail orders on what to do until her voice gave out as well. As far as Cindertail is concerned, the only reason the clan survived at all is because she coached him through things for just long enough to turn the corner on recovery. And without her, he feels lost and unsteady. They worked together for many moons, and she was a very close friend of his. And he knows that he can't possibly do her job as well as she did. But also knows he has to, because the clan has no other option at present. It's particularly painful for him because since his vision about Smokeheart's pregnancy, he hasn't been able to speak to StarClan or even see a sign from them, no matter how hard he looks to try and find one. He could use Brindlewhisker's reassurance now more than ever, and he worries the silence is a sign that she's disappointed in him. I'll be reiterating this change in a more abbreviated form at the beginning of Sageclan Part 2. I want all the changes I make to be easy to understand and adapt to, so hopefully nobody gets lost. The cat I rolled to add to Mistclan will be slotted into the video for them at the appropriate point too, so that's all nice and neat. I think this is going to add a lot to the story on top of just being a more reasonable way of portioning out clan duties, and I hope you like it as much as I do. Thanks for watching, and see you next time for Sageclan Part 2.